So welcome. Kia ora koutou, ko Sarah Tallboys toku ingoa. So I'm a member of the ANZEA board, and I'm here with Ruth Pritchard, who's also a member of the board, and she has very wonderfully offered to help today by managing the chat. So that's hugely appreciated. I thought that I would just start with a karakia and then introduce our speaker and the topic. So we'll start with whakataka taho. Whakataka taho ki te uru. Whakataka taho ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana te atakura. Hei tio, hei huka, hei hohu. Ti hei mauri ora. Yes, thank you very much for all joining us. I think we're going to have a record turnout for this session. So it's great that we have James Goh with us, who's going to talk about the use of AI in evaluation, which seems to be a topic that's of huge interest. And he's going to do that by using case studies from the UN, and we'll be including things to consider before using AI as a tool in evaluation. And I just thought I should add in the disclaimer that ANZEA doesn't endorse any AI tool. So just let you know that. As I said, the lovely Ruth is here with me to help manage questions in the chat. So if you do have a question during the presentation, please feel free to post it in the chat, and James will pick them up at the end, facilitated by Ruth. So James, if you're ready to go, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for making time and joining this workshop. I've shared my screen. So just to introduce myself, my name is James. My academic background is in AI, but I also have done a lot of evaluations, in particular surveys, interviews, these kinds of work in a lot of development organizations, Dahlberg, ID Insight, One Acre Fund. And given, having done a lot of the work, I could see a lot of how AI might be applied. And so today I'll be sharing two different case studies covering how different UN agencies have used AI. And I'll also walk you through, exactly how they did it, so you could understand how they analyzed and used it in an ethical and responsible way. So I'll focus on two main case studies. The first is with the UN Institute of Training and Research, and the second is with UNICEF. And actually, I've done a lot of projects with other UN agencies, UNESCO, UNFPA, UNHCR, and many other agencies. So if there's a specific agency that you might be interested in, I'm happy to share more during the Q&A session. You could also feel free to put your questions in the chat, and I can also answer them along the way or at the end, depending on whether I'll cover the material. So the first case study is with AI avatars. And so UNITAR wanted to use AI avatars to collect interviews and then use AI to analyze those interview transcripts. And then the second is with UNICEF, where they wanted to use AI to code their management responses to different evaluation reports. So throughout, I'll show you a brief tutorial on how they did and the software that they use. So I also founded an AI tool which supported them in the use of AI. But I'll show you just so you have a flavor of the kinds of outputs and that they use and where the human AI collaboration looks like. And then throughout, I'll cover some reflections around things like bias, hallucination, human oversight, and other issues that are common in the use of AI in evaluation. So the first case study is to use the AI avatars. So what Unitar wanted to do was they wanted to interview a lot of stakeholders and they wanted to run through this long list of interview questions with them to gather and evaluate their programs around training effectiveness. And these are pretty standard interview questions around, how frequently they did something, or whether there was any change, or whether that led to a specific outcome. So they wanted to interview a lot of different stakeholders, and this meant, one, a lot very time consuming in terms of gathering as many interviews as possible. Two, they wanted to actually interview in multiple languages. And then three, they wanted it to be done in a very consistent and in a very methodical way. So what they thought to perhaps try was to use AI avatars. So let me share my screen. And they were able to basically choose from a range of avatars, different personas that they could, match with the respondents' ethnicities or genders, and then upload their interview guide, and then have the avatars then follow that interview guide. So basically, what they got was a survey link which they then could share with their respondents via email. And then their respondents from their mobile phones or on their computers could then talk to the avatar via voice. And they could be done in many different languages. So here you see it covers a range of different languages. So that could help with having a more diverse stakeholder group that they were trying to interview. And the avatars are trained to go beyond the interview guide and ask follow-up and probing questions. So it's not just trying to follow your guide, but actually listening to what the respondents are saying in real time. And then from what they're saying, ask probing questions. So that was something very interesting for them to scale up their, data collection process and also make sure that it's diverse and participatory, involving all sorts of different stakeholders through different languages, different avatars, and having that scale and outreach. So that's what they did in terms of collecting data. And that basically gave them several outcomes. What they were able to receive were the interview responses. So basically, as the interviews came in, they were able to download all of the different transcripts and also listen to the audio files if needed. And before the respondents actually do these surveys, they could actually also ask some survey questions and set up a small survey to record basic things like name, information, email, and they could also do some mixed methods type of research. So they would also be able to collect for that interviewee some survey responses as well. So once they were able to download the transcripts, they could then proceed to analyze those data. So just some quick findings on the avatar, and I see a question around that. They were able to collect about 50 interviews in 3 days across multiple languages. The participants were generally comfortable speaking with the avatar. So just looking at the transcripts, we could see they could have that back and forth interaction in a fairly natural way. The avatar could ask good follow-up questions around probing them, asking them to give examples, following interviewing best practices around open-ended responses. And a lot of the interviews were on average about 45 minutes long, and that translated to about 10 pages of interview insights. Um, I see in the chat, there are some questions around refusal to participate. So I think for this study, the stakeholders that UNHCR had were pretty close pretty close stakeholders. They had a good relationship with them. So a lot of the respondents actually were fully participatory in the interviews. We've done other projects where the participation rate ranges. For some that has, I guess, a less close relationship with the stakeholders, we see it as low as, like 15%, pretty much like a survey response rate where they just send it to anyone and everyone that they know. And then as high as for this particular research, about 80% response rate. But that's just, I think, likely more connected to their relationship to the stakeholders. Whether it's the avatar or not the avatar, it depends. I think it's not really about the avatar, but more around how long you are taking to do these interviews. For this specific project, 45 minutes is a little bit long, but I think they had a good relationship. For other projects, to get higher response rates, typically they limit it to maybe 5 interview questions and then collect maybe 15 minutes of interviews. And then the response rates increase a lot more. In terms of whether they were able to engage and actually feel comfortable with it. So I think that's more along the lines of the length of the transcripts. And what we find there is that we got pretty good transcripts from there. Rachel asked about whether you could request for a human interviewer. And for this project, no, because they still actually conducted the human interviews, but they did not, but they supplemented these human interviews with their more strategic stakeholders, with the AI avatars to collect, beneficiaries and other implementing partners and so on. And so for this instance, they were not able to do that. But in other projects, they did. It's common to put in the email in the outreach that, if you don't want to speak to the avatar, you could contact us directly. Either send us your responses manually or schedule a meeting. But that's not something that was done in this project. Nadine had asked whether they are fully accessible or if they might face limitations. So the interface does allow for some accessibility. And because it's a voice-to-voice interface, actually that's much more convenient than like a survey or some other medium. Of course, it's maybe even better if a human does the interview for participants that need accessibility needs. But at least there's some accommodation and it makes it easy because it's a voice-to-voice interface as opposed to like a survey interface. I think Ricker asked about, safety and sensitivity. So that comes to some emerging insights at the bottom point that I'm talked about. So I'll cover some of that. We have some emerging insights from not just this project, but many, many projects that we've done. And again, these are just emerging insights. So I wouldn't say these are definitive or they're, peer-reviewed papers, although we are working with some professors trying to make this more rigorous. Female avatars get more detailed insights than male avatars. And that's kind of similar for human interviewers, where females tend to get more detailed responses. There are still technical things that we're trying to work on. So if a participant pauses for a very, very long time, the avatar might assume that the participant has sort of moved on or finished speaking and then maybe move to a different question. So trying to make sure it's more fluid is also something we're working on. We've tested it on a range of more special groups. So we've tested it on children, and they also are able to follow on pretty naturally. They say things like Mr. AI and Mrs. AI, and they do have that comfortableness with speaking to it. Although for all participants, it's a very novel experience, and they're always surprised at the first few minutes. It's not like they find it natural, but it's it's normal talking to it because it understands what you're saying and asks follow-up questions related to what you've talked about. And then we've also covered more sensitive topics. On sensitive topics, it's a range of what we find. Sometimes we find sometimes we find respondents give more detailed responses with sensitive topics. And that is sometimes because they are interested in, they feel like it's a bit more anonymous. And so they feel like, talking about this sensitive story, they don't feel like someone's looking at them and judging them too much. So sometimes they do give more detailed responses. And then other times they find that it's a bit insensitive, that it's not a human interviewing them, and they want a more personal engagement. So it really depends on, I think, the stakeholder and the relationship of who's the organization trying to do these interviews. And then this dovetails to the question around sensitive topics and strong emotions. So you're able to customize the avatar, have custom prompts where, if the participant talks about these sensitive topics or these emotions, you can have the avatar maybe stop the interview or guide it, can give it really free text instructions to guide it along. And then we typically test this out in a pilot phase, pretending to talk about different sensitive issues, and then seeing if the avatar properly escalates. This is also similar for more academic projects where to clear the ethics board, typically we would have to go through some of this and show evidence that we've done a sufficient number of pilot interviews where the situations are mocked, and then whether it's able to fully capture those and escalate those issues. So that's some emerging insights. Marty asked about comparing human versus real interviewers, and we've done that, and both of them give pretty much similar responses for this interview because, as I said, these were done both with the avatar as well as humans. So I think that's some quick findings on the AI avatar. And then I think Marie asked about whether the analysis was automated in any way. So that's right. So with 50 interviews, and also they did more than 50 interviews, it's very, very hard to try to manage all of that data. So what I'll quickly show you is the kinds of outputs that they would get from an AI analysis tool, just so you understand, what the kinds of outputs that I think AI tools across the range of tools might be able to produce today for kinds of analysis. So what I'm showing you right now is basically an AI report covering many, many different questions. And here you see just some sample questions around, what changes has it contributed to, what factors has helped or hindered the change. So, typical questions. And then I'll show you some outputs that Unitar would have received for this project. This is not the same project, of course. This is non-sensitive. So this is what one output looks like, and this is maybe an example question around how they worked with the alliance. And you'll get different outputs. One of the outputs is a summary of individual files. So here on the left, you see a bunch of different files, and these are, sort of reports and case studies. But in the Unitar's case, it would be the list of participants. So you would see participant one, participant two, and then for each participant, you'll see a long list of quotes relevant to this evaluation question. So it'll show you all those different quotes, and then you could also click on the quotes to see where they appear in the underlying document. So that helps you understand what was being said and assure yourself that it's not made up, these are not hallucinated, these are verbatims, and understand the context of what was being said. And then above this, they would then receive a summary of what that participant said with regards to that evaluation question. Anita asked about the sample size of the project. So for their project, it was about 60 interviews. So you'll see all 60 interviews on the left here. Some, and then I think there's a question around whether the summary is accurate. So you would really look at the quotes and click on the quotes to see where it appears, and then look at the summary to understand, just broadly their perspectives. And I'll share a bit more about human AI comparisons of qualitative coding for interviews soon. The next output is basically a list of codes. So we've done the analysis of each file, and then we aggregate, the AI aggregates all those different viewpoints into individual codes, and then groups the participants into those codes. So here you see, codes like strategic convening across different levels, giving technical support for partner-led advocacy. And on the right, you see all the different quotes from different participants or different documents. And again, you can click on the quotes. You could also look at the context of those quotes, and this is AI generated, so you can you can understand how those were being coded for each quote. And then you could visualize this across across the different codes, so you help to very quickly understand some of the top viewpoints. If you have things like gender or age, you can then toggle and manipulate the graph so you understand how they differ by gender or by age as well. And then finally, you get the summary across all of your participants. So it gives you that summary, and then more detailed analysis at the bottom with the assessment along with illustrative quotes from different participants. And then maybe the final thing I'll cover is on the top right, there's always an AI, there's always this chatbot that you could open up. So let me zoom out. So this is an AI chatbot, and then this is the AI analysis. So I could always chat with any analysis and get in the underlying documents as well as the AI report some additional insights if I need to. So that made it very, very quick for them to very quickly process all 60 interviews. And these are some of the findings from their AI analysis of these 60 interview transcripts. So in total, it's about 600 pages, and then they were able to analyze it in about 2 days across multiple languages. And you don't need to translate things for the AI. It understands different languages natively. So they could upload all the transcripts in those different languages directly and get the analysis in English. And then they got that very detailed report that you saw, thematic analysis, content analysis, comparing across segments, frequencies, visualizations. There's other things that I did not show, like code co-occurrences, descriptions, hypotheses that the AI generates for differences in opinion across male, gender and age and things like that. But what you saw, I think, which is why I wanted to show the interface, was really AI is mostly helping you organize your insights and index your insights and data, but it's not really giving you a lot of synthesis. And that's where you would come in to provide that synthesis. You read through those different codes, and then maybe you realize that, these should be broken up into two different codes. This should be aggregated. This should be organized in a different way because of how my client is structured in their organization. So all of that synthesis would be done by you, and then you would do on the platform. You could add more codes, you could delete things, and then AI would dynamically refine it along the way. You could change the question. And that's really where I think that human AI collaboration would come in. So that's the analysis of those transcripts. So there was a question around how do you make sure it's accurate? One is, of course, I showed you, you could click on all the quotes to see where it appears in the documents to help you check. But we've also done some other human versus AI benchmarking. This is not the same project, but this is a paper by Arizona State and Penn State, comparing human versus AI on these 371 interview transcripts. And there's some differences in the accuracy of the AI. And a lot of this is more attributed to like fatigue by humans, or over time it's a bit difficult to be consistent with the coding. You might start to generalize and just pick and choose. But the AI, but again, this is just coding. It's not really synthesis. It's just helping you organize the data. So that's a interesting, direction I think these kinds of analysis will evolve towards. I think Michelle asked about, whether it's necessary to check it, and how often you might do this. Um, it's for factual accuracy, you don't really need to do a lot of checking. So I would say typically maybe 80% of what the AI summarizes would be generally accurate. The 20%, and I'll cover this a little bit at the end as well, is where, let's say, a participant exaggerates or understates something. So a participant might say, "Oh, it was so effective, and we loved it, and everyone loved it." And then the AI will probably pick that up and say, there was some participants that had overwhelming support for the project, and so on and so forth. And so that's where, you would need to temper how the AI should make those inferences. You have the context of the project, you have context around that participant, and you then modify, what that participant, how those inferences should be made, as opposed to an AI tool, which typically would take most things at face value. So that's sort of where a lot of the sort of checking and understanding would come in, and that synthesis piece would also be very important. And then also maybe if you have some more critical stakeholders, you would then try to look for their assessments, and then you would adjust the overall assessment according to your own interpretations. So again, the AI is just organizing everything for you, and then you'll make the final assessments. And so that's where most of the time is being spent. Um, so I think that's, I see some additional questions, but let me just move on to the next case study. So the next case study is to use AI to generate themes and codes to analyze management responses. So basically what UNICEF had was a bunch of data in a spreadsheet, and they had all of that data in the spreadsheet, and each row is one evaluation report. And what they wanted was, for each evaluation report, they had a very long list of long paragraphs of management responses, about 700 of them. And so with 700 management responses, it's very hard to code them systematically and analyze them. And so what they were able to do is sort of use AI to help to code according to their evaluation framework. So I'll just show you another sample project. Again, not their data, just so it's safe. In terms of what the output looks like, and so how the human AI would interact. So here, this is just some sample response. This is, for instance, like a management response. And then the management response might be, 2 paragraphs long, but here it's just a sentence. And so they have all of these different responses. This is similar to open-ended responses, the kind of analysis that they're trying to do. And then on the right, these are all the AI labels that the AI would give to UNICEF. And so they could specify all the code bug in a lot of detail, systematically one by one. And so now with everything coded for the AI, by the AI, so it can then give you frequency charts. So it'll tell you, across the different themes and sub-themes, how many participants spoke, or how many evaluation reports talked about different topics, what were some of the common issues. And they were able to compare across, here it's by gender, but in the report it's by year, and across different types of humanitarian responses. So they could also compare across segments to understand how they differed. They could look at code co-occurrences. So for instance, if I click on this, so these are two different codes, and the AI shows that there's three responses that were coded to both issues. So they could see, a lot of reports that had funding issues also had issues with, let's say sustainability or stakeholder engagement, and they could find these correlations easily to understand, what were more prominent issues and how they could be grouped together. In a similar way, if it's more than two codes correlating with one another, they could also see some visualizations of networks. And so they could see clumps of groups of issues that were commonly occurring together and then do the kind of synthesis. Beyond some of these quantitative analyses, the AI would also give you an overall report covering the top themes and sub-themes in the analysis. And then for every single sub-theme, they could also see some more detailed analysis. So they could also see, for instance, here at the bottom, so this is for a single sub-theme, and then it gives you that summary along with illustrative quotes. And at the bottom, the long list of managed responses tagged to that subtopic. And then, they could adjust the code book, they could merge things together, they could delete quotes, and then they could dynamically get the AI to recode it instantly based on changes that they want. So that's what they wanted to do. And this is the final output in their report. So you'll see a lot of the AI, a lot of what the AI summarizes and organizes feature directly in the report. So for instance, here, a lot of the summaries and the elaboration of what people talked about was incorporated in the report directly. The charts and the frequency analyses were also incorporated in the report directly. So a lot of the outputs could be very directly once they look through all of the assessments and make sure that it's right, and then they could group things and merge things together. They could then very quickly generate some of these reports. This report was more interesting because this was an intentional human versus AI comparison of this kind of qualitative coding. And so they found it good at identifying themes, written a good quality draft. It was very fast. It featured a wide range of examples. It was able to pull in from different languages. And then, of course, it still needed verification, review, and validation, which is where I talked about, some reports might over-exaggerate the issue or might understate the issue, or they might just focus more on superficial issues. And the consultant has, again, is doing the synthesis, not, and so they would decide actually a lot of the root cause is XYZ. And so I'll add a code on this issue, and then the AI would redo everything for you. So this is my final slide, and then we can have a more deeper discussion, but I already see some questions. So I think there is a question around things like whether humans were involved to understand the languages, to check the summaries and translations. So yes, they would, for all of the UN analysis, there's a standard evaluation, use of AI evaluation framework where often the first step is to do a pilot or to just do a sample analysis, check the sample analysis. So they would spot check the analysis to find if there's any issues, including across different languages. I would say languages, especially common languages in reporting like French, English, Arabic, and other languages, typically are not a key issue. The issue comes with, other types of languages, especially in the interviewing side, rather than on the report side in the summaries. So that links to like the first point, which is around hallucination and biases. I see that also in the question. On hallucination, you'll see again that all of the assessments are, has a footnote or is linked to a quote, and you can click on the quotes. So these are already verified as, actual quotes. So the risk of things like hallucination, I think over time, as AI gets better and also user interfaces get better, a much smaller risk of hallucination. You could always probably in the future click on anything and see the source and see the underlying text. So you wouldn't be that worried about hallucination. And then on bias, this kind of analysis is not as similar as, healthcare, making healthcare decisions or financial decisions on, risk assessment and loan assessment, where bias really will play a huge role. This is just summarizing and pulling out quotes. So the issues around bias is much less. And in any case, you could always fact check all of the analysis and see if all the quotes are correctly being extracted out. So I would say bias will not be a huge issue when trying to do summaries and coding. You can also see that from the different case studies, the accuracy is fairly high, and it's able to analyze across multiple case studies and use cases pretty effectively. And we showed some human AI comparisons. What I do want to highlight, where it actually does go wrong is more with ambiguous phrasings. So I talked about one instance where where sort of the source data sort of exaggerates, or the source data is just maybe inconsistent in their viewpoints, or they say something but have no justification, so you don't really know if you should trust it. For the AI, it will take a lot of the source material at face value. So you would have to guard against that. And then that's sort of linked to in the chatbot Bo's question around capturing implicit messages or high context cultures. As I said, it takes most things at face value. So trying to capture implicit messaging may be challenging. It's not that the AI won't be able to capture it, but it's very contextual often. And often you need to know who that stakeholder is, their history with the program, how they coming in, might have some of these hypotheses already. And so it's hard for some external party to sort of figure those kinds of context out without having that deep knowledge. And so that's again where your synthesis and direction is very important to guide the AI in the right inferences. The point on this slide is a similar one, which is on ambiguous phrasings. So things like strategic partnership or leave no one behind, these are very ambiguous. So if you ask the AI, who are all the strategic partners in this report, it will pull out sort of everything and anything that's called a partner, or a partner would be featured as maybe a strategic partner. So if you're not clear in your definitions, and if different reports or different stakeholders have different definitions, you'll see the AI just treat what people say at face value. And so you then need to come in to say, that's really just a vendor. It's not a partnership in any way. It's just an implementing partner. It's not a real strategic partner. And then you'll have to come up with the right definitions and guide the AI to the right codes. And that's maybe more difficult than what you might expect, because you need to really be quite careful in making these definitions clear. And often, even amongst the team, it's very hard to come up with a standard definition anyways. The next point is around the need for human oversight. So one is what I talked about, which is the AI just organizes your data, and then you need to be there to draw out the inferences and implications. This to some extent links to Amy's question, which is around sensitive evaluations, where safety and risk assessment of participants are involved. So again, it's not a blanket application of the AI. If there's a high risk situation, there's a risk that it might trigger sensitive responses. The stakeholder relationship is not close. You probably don't want to use an AI avatar. You probably want to, interview people personally. You could interview them in person even. So it really depends. And what I shared around emerging insights with sensitive evaluations and interviews. As I said, some topics are less sort of less emotional and more in the embarrassing nature sensitivity, and those sometimes we see the avatar get more responses. But then some are more really, as in this example around gender violence and so on, that could be purely a very emotional topic and high risk. So you probably don't want to deploy something like that. So you have to, of course, look and see how that works. Um, Rachel talked about what we would do, now that AI is doing all this. Again, there's a strong need for human oversight. So it's really not as uh, it just summarizes your data, I think. Um, Let me see if there's uh, I'll take some of the final questions after covering this final point. The last point is on data security. So, a lot of this is quite sensitive. So, I think whatever platform you choose, just make sure that the data is fully encrypted so no one else can see your data, and it's not used to train any AI models so that your data is leaked outside. Um, I think these two provisions are sort of the first layer check that you should have, and then that could help quickly triage what tools you might want to use versus not. So I think that's my presentation. Ruth, I think you would guide
Yeah,
through Q&A
thank you
and
so much, James.
yeah.
I can assess from the interaction that's happening on the chat that people are very interested. It was a fascinating presentation, and you managed that timing so well. And one can only admire how many chat questions you responded to. I've been keeping track of them, and I crossed them out every time you actually talk to them. There's only a few left. But please, anybody, feel free to dig into any of the questions that you feel weren't quite answered or you have additional ones. We've got a few minutes left. Shall we go to Cara? Would you like to talk a little bit about the question you've just added around waiting on responses to specific questions or points? Yeah. Do you want to
Sorry,
just
I'm at home with a high schooler studying for exams who was just making an enormous racket with a blender. So,
do you
so
want to stop
I've just
sharing your
retreated to
screen,
another
James?
room. Um,
If you
um,
stop, can I just interrupt you, Cara?
yeah,
If you stop sharing your screen, James, then perhaps we can look at people as we talk and get a sense. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Ruth. James, thanks so much. That was such a great presentation, and yeah, going into I think a lot of the questions that a lot of us have got in our minds, but haven't necessarily seen sort of answers to. Because what you were showing is, it's pretty impressive, and a lot of the, I suppose, some of those uh, ethical considerations appear to have been pretty well considered. I was actually interested in whether or not your platform is able to apply sorts of tags so you can have a bit of a play with the data to see a wee bit like sensitivity testing. So, for example, you might see if men or males respond in different ways to certain questions or sub questions. So, it's where I can see done right, there could be some real power to do some much more sort of deep exploration of the data. So, yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so I think this is an important piece where often you run out of time in your evaluations to do that sensitive, I guess, or crosstabs. Just to quickly show you in the frequency codes, for instance, we always show how they differ across gender or age or different regions. So you could very quickly see if there's some differences across gender. And then the AI will also describe why they were different. So qualitatively, which is maybe more important, it explains here, for instance, what females generally talked about, what males generally talked about, and then what were some similarities and differences between males and females, and some hypotheses for why they may have had these differences in opinion. And you could tag manually, all the different documents, all different interviews into these different segment groups. And then the AI will then quickly give you those summaries and give you comparisons and hypotheses. Then you'll then probably have a better context of what was actually the root reasons. And then you get to pick and choose and chat with the AI to refine the analysis.
But at the moment, it doesn't have a way to sort of do that in I suppose, in a more streamlined sense. Because I was also, like sometimes you can actually place a weighting on um,
I see.
like I'll give you an example, like a concrete example. So, if standard situation, you're doing a range of stakeholder interviews, you're asking a fairly generic set of questions, but you know that the responses that are being given to you from certain stakeholders have more weight because they know more about the program. They can give you actually
Right,
more
right.
accurate responses, but you're wanting to give everyone an opportunity to kind of feedback on, how well do you think it was designed? And some people might go, oh, it was rubbish, but actually they maybe don't know some
Mm,
of the considerations. So it was that, that was what sort of triggered my thought process. And then I could
right.
see actually then it could also, if you could apply that, then it might give you a bit more scope to do a bit of, that kind of more like sensitivity testing exploration.
We've done some internal testing, but I don't think we're that comfortable having that kind of sort of weighting or sort of custom instructions. So some users, what they do is they do, prompt the AI, focus a bit more on, the director or focus more on the program director viewpoints. But I think it's not. It's still a bit too, I think it's maybe a bit over relying on AI at that point because telling the AI who more to focus on and so on is so subjective, and how much to focus on and for what topics, it's kind of too subjective. So instead, we treat all the analysis similarly, and then because we show you the granular viewpoints of individual participants, we then allow you to make the final assessments on who to focus more on. But I do think, hopefully over time, there'll be a way to maybe a bit more transparently show how they could weight the different participants. In the example that I showed you, what that context would look like would be sometimes they're tagged to sort of more strategic partners versus implementing partners, and then they could see the quantitative distributions of their viewpoints across those different segments. And then the AI would not make that kind of decision to make those inferences, but you would be able to see how they were distributed, and then you could make your judgment call to say, who should be, what kind of viewpoints we should take in. Otherwise, the AI would just say, most of the strategic partners felt X way, and then most implementing partners felt X way, and then have those separate for you to then make the final call.
Thanks, James. And I think there's a couple of follow-up questions in the chat that are kind of linked to this conversation. And Maria raised one of them, and she's got her hand up. So I'll put myself on mute now.
James, it was a fascinating presentation. Thank you so much. And the platform looks pretty amazing. I was just wondering if there are other added functionalities of this platform in terms of analyzing big data, admin data, and triangulating findings next to your survey results, and also possibly doing some cost-benefit analysis. Like, what's the kind of scope of your platform?
Yeah, so at least in my domain, I focus more on the qualitative side.
Okay.
So it covers, analyzing documents and analyzing Excel sheets. You could have some simple survey data, and then we could, even if it's numerical, we'll give you simple summaries and charts, but not really statistical analysis. And then in that domain, includes transcription, translation, getting some data from websites, things like that, but not the quantitative piece. I think for quantitative analysis, actually, what I find the best so far has been ChatGPT. It does code execution and quantitative analysis fairly well, although you have to have sort of well-structured and clean data that's machine readable for AI to be able to analyze it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bo, does that also answer your question that you had around demographic data external importing? Where are you? There you are.
So I think, yeah, is Bo gonna come on, or maybe I'll just respond.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, you could upload like a spreadsheet and then get the AI to tag your respondents to to different genders, age. You could also get the AI to go into the transcripts and then look at what they said and then tag them accordingly. So they might introduce themselves as a male or a father or a mother, and then you could get the AI to tag the documents for you, male or female, based on what was being said in the transcript. So you don't need technically a spreadsheet, but it depends on what's in the transcripts.
So that means you can group those grouping variables in your AI tool.
Yeah, that's right. You could group
cool.
any kind of variable. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, James.
Thanks, James. We have about 5 more minutes if there's other people who would like to ask questions. I just want to make sure Anita asked how long does it take to set up the avatar and data collection protocol? It's a question.
So setting it up takes like 3 minutes. You just paste your interview questions and then type like how you want the AI to introduce themselves and how you want the AI to conclude the interview. So it's really very quick, but you do have to do some initial pilots and then get feedback, and then you realize your questions are not sufficiently targeted, or you realize that you need to give a bit more direction on what to follow up on because, maybe 2 sentences of research objective is not sufficient. You need to maybe guide it in smaller sub-bullets of what kinds of follow-ups would be more relevant to your study. So that's that iterative process of maybe doing like a week of pilots. And then I think after a week or just maybe 5 interviews, you will get a better sense of what the edge cases that might appear. And then once that's done, you could probably scale up to send to your 100, 200, 500 respondents, even if that's your scale.
So Marty's asked, can you also share the link to the assessment comparing the AI error with human-based with humans that you were speaking about? Is that possible to put in the chat, for example?
Yeah. Let me share the UNICEF report.
Oh, and I had a question about when would this recording be available? It's available as soon as our part-time administrator can get it organised, and it will be sent out to you. It's usually a couple of weeks after, so you can have the and James has agreed that can be shared along with his PowerPoint. We'll follow up with that shortly. And then someone asked about a previous Kai Korero chat, and I will follow that up with our administrator. So thank you for raising that. There it is. Okay, is there anyone else? Is there a limit in terms of data size or a scale? James, that's the question Michelle and Bo have asked.
You're saying the question.
Do you have data size limits for the monthly subscription, and is there a limit scale-wise?
So you could analyze as many files as you want, as many questions as you want, not any real practical limits.
Is there any other questions before we close, or comments?
Is that scientific publication also available, James, or is that behind a paywall?
Let me see if it's available. Yeah, it might be.
Even if you can send share the link to that one as well,
Yeah.
that would be great, and some people might have access to it.
Let me see if I can find it.
Thanks, James.
Thanks very much, everyone. I'm just going to pass over to Sarah to close off once we're just finishing with our final comments. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Ruth. Yes, as just echoing what people are posting in the chat, James, thank you very much for, yeah, a really interesting and very comprehensive and smooth presentation. I was very impressed by how you managed to just weave the chat into the presentation as you went along. It was really good. And given the amount of interest, I'm sure that everyone will be really excited to know that ANZEA's conference next year, which is going to be in Christchurch from the 3rd to the 5th of August, the theme of that is going to be the use of AI in evaluation. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled for the upcoming announcements of that. In the meantime, yeah, as Ruth said, the recording and the presentation will become available in due course. So I just thought that I would close with a karakia. Kia tau te rangamari e, ki runa ina iwi o te ao. And that is, let your peace reign on all the people of the world. So I hope that you all go and have a wonderful rest of your day. And yes, thanks, James, again. And I see that you've posted your contact details in the chat. So thanks very much for that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Ka kite.
Hey, everyone.
Bye.
Ka kite.